Okay. Greetings. Good morning to everyone in Australia. I see there's a few people from the chilly Blue Mountains, Robert and Sharon, and from all other parts of the world. So as you can see, there's still a little bit of condensation on my windows. It's been a rather chilly time on the east coast of Australia. Not too bad compared, relatively speaking, but they did have -9 in Cooma the other day, and -6. No, was it -6? No, maybe -3 in Canberra. Pretty cold, and I think we only got down to 4 or 5. So it's lovely though. These changing seasons, and so those of you in the northern hemisphere are enjoying a warm summer. I hope not too warm. And just looking where everyone's joining from now, that they've probably got the notification. So those of you in the UK and Europe, it's quite late at night, so it's impressive. Oh, -2 you got in the mountains. That's cold. Anyway, it's quite late in the UK and Europe, so good on you for staying up. And this meditation hopefully will be the last thing you do before you go to sleep, and encourage you all to spend a little time meditating before you go to sleep at night. It has a tremendous impact on the quality of the sleep, the nature of dreams, particularly if you finish with some metta meditation. It impacts, it helps you have more peaceful sleeps. And whether you do that sitting up before bed, which is often really good because it helps to really tire you out, or just lying down and doing some conscious meditation, breathing, yoga nidras, so on. So that's what the people in Europe and the UK, I'm not sure about Northern Africa, what time exactly it is, but I think it's getting late. And the rest of us are starting our day. And of course, it's great to start the day with meditation too. Or even if it's any time of the day. So I'm realizing everybody's obviously different times of the day. I think it's the afternoon in most parts of the States and Canada, South America. Anyway, 3 o'clock here, Judd, and I don't know where here is. 3:05's probably California, just a guess. Belgium is 11 p.m. Well done, Carlian. I won't keep you up for much longer. Mexico. What time is it in Mexico, Miguel? Kansas. It's great, isn't it? I haven't been, most of these places haven't been. It's all an imagination. So, okie dokie. So I think that's 11 a.m. in Hawaii, 2 in California, 3 in Mexico. Okay. So if you haven't been before, and I think there might be a few newbies, what we normally do is spend time, 20, 30 minutes in a guided meditation. Helping to settle the mind. I'm going to have a coughing attack in a minute. Bear with. Nearly choked on my breakfast this morning for some reason. Sorry. Anyway, so we'll sit for about 20 to 30 minutes with some guidance. And then there's an opportunity for Dharma questions, okay? So I'll turn the chat off now so that during the meditation, if people come in late, it doesn't get disturbing. and then I shall put it on again. Put it on again after the meditation. Okay, and just hope that I don't have another coughing fit. Okay, so please get yourself comfortable. And the sun's coming up, so I'll let the natural light come in. Oh, we're about to have a beautiful sunrise over there. You can't see it. If I could turn the camera, I could show you the pink sky. Ooh. And no doubt during the meditation, you'll hear lots of birds waking up, magpies, whipbirds, currawongs if they're around. So I invite you all just to join me at least in the sounds and some of the visuals. You can see the spotted gum forest behind me. So whether you use open-eyed or closed-eyed meditation, just do what works for you. And begin by just turning your attention within. So as you do that, just start to connect to the natural respiration. If you like to take a few deep conscious breaths to begin with, that's always quite helpful. So just letting things settle naturally. We don't need to use any force or violence in meditation. Just let it be gentle, applying just the right amount of effort to stay awake and upright and alert, but not tense. Just notice if there's any tension in your body, any tension in your breathing, any tension in your mind. And simply notice that. As soon as you become awake to it, it can naturally dissolve. It's these unconscious habitual patterns of tensing, striving, of liking or not liking, of pushing away or trying to hold on to, that we're becoming conscious of in the meditation. Getting to know the habit patterns of the mind and the way this impacts the body. So come fully into your bodies. Noticing the weight, the solidity. Noticing the different sensations and vibrations throughout the body. And the breath is part of the body. The breath is the body. So when I say body, it includes the body of breath. So simply relax and rest and just observe the cascading, changing sensations throughout the whole body without wanting to change anything. And notice how relaxing this starts to become when you simply surrender, let go, and relax into the natural state of things, just as they are. Breathing in. I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out. I know I'm breathing out. Just this. And simply start with this deliberate attention that's relaxed and open. Whatever thoughts are stirring in the mind, pay them no attention. Don't get hooked onto them. See how they're just part of the cascading changes, just like the breath, the body, the sensations. not me, not mine. Keeping the body still allows the mind to slowly, slowly become more still in communion with it. Becoming more unified, more tranquil. Simply by watching. Not by doing, not by controlling or forcing. Just watching, just knowing, just being and relaxed. And once we've developed a modicum of calm, in our meditation. It's an opportunity to turn our attention just gently to investigating this mind-body experience. Once the waves of the ocean are a little less rough and wild, it's possible to see something of what lies beyond the surface of the waves. So if you imagine these thoughts, movements that come and go, to be just like the waves of the ocean, it's not a problem. It's just part of the ocean, but just know them as waves, not separate. But also don't identify with them as me. Just notice if their frequency has settled a bit, or maybe it's even been stirred up by sitting still. Sometimes that happens. We never know what's going to come up in meditation. So we're just open without expectations. So now just turn your attention to this thinking process itself. Whether it's rapid and wild, or just like gently lapping waves, it doesn't matter. One isn't better than the other. It's just what's presenting itself for you right now. So consciously direct your intention to just watching these thoughts. And as you do, notice what actually happens. Being interested, but not identified, not invested in them. And as you turn looking at these thoughts themselves, try to find the one who is thinking them. Look for the thinker themselves. Can you find the thinker in the midst of all these rising and ceasing thoughts? If you can't find an independent thinker, then who's doing the thinking? What's doing the thinking? Where are these thoughts coming from? And where are they going? So really critically, radically examine your own thinking process. Don't just be complacent. Otherwise, we simply get stuck in these habitual patterns, caught on the hamster wheel. Start to really unravel this process that we think we know and understand, and that we take as me, mine, who I am. If you are your thoughts, and most of the time people walk around believing their thoughts and that they are who they are, where's the thinker? As Ramana Maharshi says, the mind is simply a bundle of thoughts. And these thoughts constitute the sense of self, the ego. And what do you notice about these thoughts? Is there any consistency? Any true continuity? Congruency? No more than just waves on the ocean. Some big, some small, some rough, some gentle. And regardless of their quality, they all share the same nature. They're all empty. Empty of substance, empty of a self. And even though you can't find an independent thinker, or if you've magically managed to find one, I guarantee you it'll just be another thought. You can't find a thinker. You can't find an independent self. in these bundle of thoughts. And yet you experience something quite constant that knows all of this. At least when you step aside and just witness, be the witness. So can you find a witness? Can you know witnessing? Or at least sense a stable knowing within all of these changing experiences. It is there. Otherwise, you'd be completely swamped, completely mad by the crashing waves. So something within you is stable enough just to sit, just to watch and know. So this is where we start. Just start with the knowing. Be with the knowing. Don't make it into anything special. Don't make another me out of it. An awakened me. Just know. Without the person. Without the accolades and achievements. And see where it takes you. If you practice just recognizing the knowing nature of your mind, the awareness itself, both within the formal meditation and throughout your day, when you can remember whatever you're doing. Just come back home, just resting in the knowing. And see how that transforms your life radically, deeply. It doesn't always mean that you start to feel blissful or peaceful. In fact, it can bring up a lot of discomfort, agitation, anxiety that you were busy distracting yourself from before, or drugging yourself against, medicating yourself against. Whatever we do to avoid this discomfort. But when we willingly open up to whatever arises, which will always cease anyway, things really start to happen, start to clear out and open up. So the essence of the practice is really quite simple. But also quite difficult when we're conditioned to want to move away from things or look for more exciting things. But if you trust in this is really the essence of the practice, of all practices. Spiritual practices, that is. So when you feel ready, we can move our bodies if you need to. But even in moving, even in opening your eyes, changing postures, engaging in talking or whatever, the knowing nature is still there. And that's what will keep you grounded, become your refuge. If you learn to recognize it firstly, more and more, and trust in it. So just take a stretch if you need, a drink, and I'll turn the chat back on. And if people have any questions that arise from that particular meditation, that's always good to keep the focus going on the meditation itself. Glasses are fogged up, but I think I can see. Right, I've turned them back on, so let's just see. I'll just test myself. Test. Yeah, it works. So Taran, before we turn the chat off, Taran was saying it's 2:36 a.m. in India, and you're awake, Taran, having a late night meditation, because it's a full moon at the moment. So nice to stay awake, watching the moon if you can see the moon. So Chris has asked, are we God? Well, it depends. I mean, how do you actually define God? It really, there's, what a problematic concept that is. So it would really depend on what you mean by this concept. The all creator of the world, the omniscient knower. Yeah, I mean, everyone has a different concept of God. Perhaps we don't need to bother God. But if you think of I was brought up Catholic. So, you can imagine the images I had in my head of this patriarchal God. A little bit punishing, I think, judgmental. And so you always thought that God was keeping an eye on you. But, when one listened to the teachings from the Gospels, then and sung the hymns, which I used to really love doing. So I remember the hymns were always things like, God is love, God is peace, God is truth. So they're not people, are they? They're not patriarchal gods. They're qualities. God is compassion. So in that sense, if you just do away with this personification of God and think about the qualities, then of course we have those, and all the masters will remind us that our natural state is love, is compassion, is wisdom and truth. They're all there, obscured by the conditionings that we pick up from this life, many lifetimes. And it's waiting to be revealed. So it's there within. You could say that, God is within. These qualities are within. And God is also defined, particularly by people like Master Eckhart, as emptiness itself. So quite a Buddhist thing, emptiness, open. And emptiness doesn't mean a blank void, nothingness. Emptiness is the whole matrix. It's what everything arises out of and falls back into. So that's, it's another concept of God. And we can move beyond the concepts to actually experiencing these qualities within ourselves, or even not even qualities, just the fabric of reality within ourselves. So, yeah, if you want to kind of challenge the concept of God to become a little bit deeper and more encompassing, then we'd certainly have those qualities within. And, there's so many key pointers to that, be still and know that I am God. So it's only in the stillness that one can know God as a truth. Okay. Right, so Sheila and Joanna found that was helpful, a longing to go home. Yeah, and home is only here now. It's not going anywhere. It's just letting the obscurations and the veils, uncovering them, letting them part. Okay, so Lisa has asked how to differentiate for the mind when meditating before sleep so that we don't fall asleep. Differentiate for the mind. So I'm not 100% sure I know what you mean, but doesn't matter if you're meditating before sleep and using it as a way to help you sleep, particularly if you have insomnia. Then if you can stay awake for a while and then naturally fall into sleep, that's actually quite a nice thing to do. But you don't want to make that a habit pattern if when you're meditating during the day that all you do is start falling asleep. So my encouragement is to sit up and meditate if you can before going to bed, and then the mind will naturally get peaceful, hopefully as it did in that meditation. And so when you lie down to sleep, there'll be less kind of stuff to process, rada going on, because you've just sat with it, it's settled down, you lie down. Yeah, there might be some waves of thoughts processing the day going on, but a lot less. And then you naturally fall into sleep. But if if you have a problem with sleepiness when you're meditating, then just look into that. Just try to be on that edge before the mind becomes dull. When it does become dull, look into the dullness itself. And what happens is that the mind then becomes quite clear. But if you just get intoxicated or drawn in by the dullness, then you fall asleep. All right, Eric Lee has asked, I live in the city, so there are many options with everything. Oh, yes. We don't have many options here. I notice I have preferences. In stillness, I am free from my preferences. Yeah. How can I better understand these moments? Well, in daily life, we do have preferences, and doesn't have to be a problem, You prefer a latte over a long black or something, or you prefer, I don't know, what do people prefer? Whether it's food preferences or clothing preferences or movie preferences or music preferences. It's not a problem. The problem becomes when we think our preferences are better and everybody else has got bad taste, and then we start arguing, and then when we don't get our preferences, we suffer, or we get puffed up with pride. So to hold these preferences with lightness and wisdom is the key. You prefer to go to the opera rather than to a rock concert, not a problem, but it doesn't mean that you're better than other people, or that they're just headbangers or something. They might be headbangers, that's what they do. It's just people have different preferences. But yes, you've noticed that when you come into stillness, all those preferences dissolve. And why wouldn't they? Because we're going beyond the samsaric realm of things, of stuff, to moving towards the unconditioned, where we're free from stuff. That's why it feels good. You can still make stuff out of it if you're not careful with your concepts, but you recognize that in stillness, which is the natural state of the mind, it lets go, because it sees that this stuff, which are attached to preferences, are all just conditioned phenomena which arise and cease. So why get involved and attached in them? And so I think it's a good investigation for you to take, Eric, into, I don't know how you're dealing with your daily preferences, but if there's attachments, that's when you see, this is clinging, and this is where suffering happens and stress happens. And that's why people often want to run into meditation as an escape from that. And that has its pros and cons if it's not done skillfully. It's really starting, hopefully, develop wisdom that you can take this same level of stillness and freedom from liking and disliking into the daily life at the same time as still order a cafe latte. You know, it's just stuff. That's all it is. So we've got to look at stuff as stuff, or dharmas as dharmas, and free ourselves from these likes and dislikes and clinging. So as Alyssa says, I hope that makes sense. I'm not sure what that was, Alyssa. Now I've lost you all. This thread goes absolutely ballistic. Okay. So someone's asked, is the material or the physical body, etc., that we perceive made out of thought? Well, apparently it is. What is the difference between dreams and waking reality? Apparently nothing. So that's what they say. Well, you have to see that for yourself, and whether I say it or someone else says it, it makes no difference if it just remains as an intellectual, interesting belief. But you can see that more and more in the depth of meditation, or even not sometimes not even when you're sitting, but you might be going around your day. You know, this happens a lot of times to people. And just for that moment, you feel that everything's quite dreamscapey, very, very surreal. It's made out of light, it's substanceless. You know, as kids, everyone has this experience from time to time, particularly as a kid. It's like everything feels like a dream. And of course, when you're experiencing something very intense, like a near-death experience or a sickness or a road accident or death, deep grief, just everything starts to feel quite substanceless. So you can see that there's no solid reality here. And even if you don't believe the spiritual masters through their own direct experience, science is on board. If you look into quantum physics, there is no substance to the material universe, which includes our body. It's 99.99999% space. Yeah. That's a scientific understanding through maths or however they figure it out. So, you have this sort of proof, rational proof, if you like, but the masters experience that. They recognize that it's the thought that gives rise to the physical world, because we concretize everything, we label everything, we give it a name, which includes our physical body and its many parts, and we create the world simply out of the mind itself. So if you think of a baby, a newborn baby, it has no concepts. It doesn't have a sense of a me in here and a world out there yet. It's this sort of oceanic consciousness without labels, names. And, that's why babies are always looking blissed out and smiling. It's like, you were a baby once. It's all just light and lots of little angels appearing every now and then. And then everything starts to become more and more defined, concretized, focused. And then mum and dad start to teach us that this is me, this is my name, this is the other. And that's how duality comes about. And obviously we need that at one level to function in the world. Otherwise we'd be a little baby with no language, no concepts. And we wouldn't survive for very long. So it's necessary evil, if you like. But the problem is there's no wisdom. we don't recognize it as a relative truth. We take it as the truth, the absolute truth. And so we suffer. And I was just coming back to that question when we experience our waking reality as a dream through intense experiences. It reminds me, a friend of ours told us his story. He was driving down a road, must have been a wet road or something, and his car skidded and flipped about 3 times, and it landed on its tires. But he said, as it was flipping, it's quite violent, serious car accident, his mind sort of went back, and he was just laughing. He was laughing his head off, recognizing it was all just a dream and there was nothing to fear. In that moment, there was just knowing that it's all just, it's okay. And he was hysterically laughing. I mean, sometimes we laugh out of shock, don't we? But this was a bit different in that moment of knowing and kind of separating from the forms and the identification with the forms and this idea that this is a tragic car accident. So that was kind of, that, I guess that was his kind of saving grace. I'm not sure how much trauma came later, because the body does experience trauma from things like that, but probably lessened it. Anyway, better get on with the other questions. If I can find them. Okay, so Reverend's asking, in Zen, sometimes we ask Kanzeon for help. I imagine that's like some sort of deity. Is there a similar kind of asking my true self for help? Asking that part of me that is not separate from me, but is the deeper, truer in me, in Theravada. Well, Theravada is not one complete package. Everybody practices, we have this notion that there's a Theravada Buddhism, but there's so many different practices and approaches within it. So I'm just trying to think of how I might relate that to the practice, some of the practices I've come across. But, I think when one takes refuge in the Triple Gem, bowing to the Buddha before one practices, at the end of practice, this is refuge, taking refuge, then that itself is, it's not bowing to a statue, even though the statue is there as a symbol. It's recognizing that Buddha that we bow down to, which is really just, when we say bowing down, it's surrendering, it's letting go into that nature, that Buddha nature within us, and letting that come forth rather than the ego, deluded ego self. And similarly with bowing to the Dharma, taking refuge in the Dharma is taking refuge in the higher truth. And that truth is nowhere else but within us when we recognize it. And the Sangha is the noble ones that you could say is like Kanzeon, the noble ones which are a field of merit that support us in our practice, that send us teachings, that guide us. So I would say just that simple practice of bowing down 3 times, taking refuge in the Triple Gem, is similar to that. But in addition, there may be many different things that Theravadan Buddhists do, particularly in the traditional countries with pujas. I know the Sri Lankans have quite elaborate pujas in offerings, and they used to do that in the monastery where we lived, with food offerings and transferring of merits. And the Thai Theravadins do all sorts of things. Imagine the Burmese, Laos, do similar. But that's how I can relate to it in my own practice. And in that bowing, I guess you are releasing and surrendering, and not so much asking for help, just trusting that help comes from within when you bow, when you let go. Okay. So Vedana, who has just asked below what tradition I ordained in, I've just answered that question, which is the forest, the Thai forest tradition, connected with Ajahn Chah and Ajahn Sumedho. Ajahn Sumedho is about to turn 90. If you go on YouTube, there's lots of his talks. He's still talking. Amazing energy, amazing wisdom. And that is, I've been listening and learning from him since I was 20-something. So nearly over 35 years I've been, and Ajahn Chah, of course. He passed before I met him. So that is the Thai forest tradition. And, even though we live in a more independent way from the monasteries, particularly as women, my heart is very connected to that tradition and to the wisdom that he and Ajahn Chah impart. So Jade's asking, could you speak to the turn the light around from the golden flower? Okay, so that he's referring, if people don't know, to a reading I did maybe a couple of months ago from The Secret of the Golden Flower. And there's 2 videos up there if people are inquisitive, want to listen to that. The first one's called, it's an extract, it's a synthesis of The Secret of the Golden Flower, and the second video that follows it is called Turn the Light Around, which is kind of the details of the practice itself. But very simply, to turn the light around is simply to turn the attention within. When we're talking about light, light is the essence of reality, of awareness. Now, what we normally do with that light is we go out there and we shine it on all the objects, and we go like, dislike, me, mine, yours, good, bad, right, left, male, female, and it becomes duality. When we turn the light around to turn within, then a very different experience happens. And this is what I was just talking about, that it becomes more the light becomes unified, harmonious, and non-dual. So that's the practice. And that was just a very interesting tradition. I wouldn't even call it a tradition, phenomena, a teaching that arose many moons ago in China, and it came down through a kind of a transmission. So anyway, if you're interested in the history of that, you can find a lot of it on the internet. And Carl Jung was someone who was introduced to it and found it very interesting for his understanding of the psyche, of universal archetypes, consciousness, universal consciousness, and so on. It's just, again, another way of explaining the practice, the truth. All right, Amy is asking, you mentioned that when we are with the witnessing, it's not always peaceful or blissful, but that anxiety can arise. I'm wondering what I am experiencing. Is that anxiety simply, I'm wondering what I'm experiencing. Is that anxiety simply energy in the body? At one level, yeah, of course, everything is energy. At one level, it's also not that important to analyze the cause of the anxiety. I mean, if the insight comes up as to the cause, that's fine. But if we just spend too much time trying to analyze the cause of the anxiety, or what it is it anxiety, or is it depression, or is it excitement? Just know, it's better just to know the felt sense. What does it feel like in the body? Because as I said in the meditation, when we do just settle and stop distracting ourselves and moving and doing, then it gives space for old stuff to come up. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes it's just not much stuff comes up, so we just experience a lot of peace. But sometimes the anxiety comes up. That doesn't have to preclude or do away with the peace. We can be peaceful even in the face of anxiety emerging if we stay more with the knowing of it. And the way to stay with the knowing is how does it manifest in the body? It's probably restlessness, tension. Maybe the mind starts on its old loop of rada, 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 rada. He said, she said, old memories. Just know, old memories. If I indulge these old memories, then this anxiety gets more and more intense and I'm swept away by it. So just know it. And it is energy. It's like, you can also relate to it as it's just old karma, and it's an opportunity to do away with old karma. And by not feeding it, not adding on to it, and in the knowing and the just staying with it and witnessing it, you are putting an end to karma. Okay. So Lynn says, who or what is it that chooses? Chooses what? Chooses. I think I'm going to have to just pull this down. Pardon me for a sec. Puts a lot of light on the screen. So we have this tendency to always want to make something into a whoosy or a whatsy, don't we? And that in itself is part of our conditioning. We have to label everything. So it's like there's choosing without a chooser. There's meditating without a meditator. There's knowing without a knowing. Okay? There's experiencing without an experiencer. If you want to kind of understand, I guess the most accurate thing would be wisdom. It's wisdom that makes right choices anyway, and it's delusion that makes wrong choices. But there's no individual entity that we can say is the chooser. It's again coming back to whether the choices, we can call it will is directed through delusion, influenced by delusion, or whether it's informed and spontaneously chosen through wisdom. And wisdom tends to be very spontaneous because it's not conceptual, whereas delusion comes out of a lot of manipulation, fabrication, pontification, and wanting. I want to make the right choice. I. So it's very deliberate. Whereas when things happen through wisdom, there's not a lot of, there's no, if it's real wisdom, it doesn't come through, what's the word? I'm saying manipulation, but there's another word that's a bit more helpful if it comes to me. See, it's not trying too hard. The thing where you deliberate a lot, yeah, because you want to get the right outcome. Wisdom doesn't do that. It just knows without a knower. All right, Eve. Our thoughts are like waves of the ocean, a force of nature, not under any control. Correct? Yet you said to recognize and trust this practice. Will that change anything? Thoughts continue to wave. Okay, so there's a few parts to this. So don't want to imply, at one level, yes, we don't have any control over our thoughts, do we? At one level. They just can't say, you sit there, can you stop the thinking? Not unless you take some heavy-duty drugs or have an anesthetic. Even then, there's probably thoughts under anesthesia. So they come. They are, you could say, a force of nature, or you could just say a conditioned process. But even when we recognize them and step back and watch them, it doesn't mean that they necessarily stop completely. But the difference is, I mean, if we rest in just knowing and not investing in them, then naturally they will subside. You know, like thinking of the lapping on the shore. That's what they can become like. And eventually they can become, you know, not always, but for moments in samadhi, like a still ocean where there are no thoughts. But even if it's not, it still doesn't matter. That's not the ultimate at one level. That's not the ultimate goal. Whether they're there or not, it doesn't matter, because the knowing, the awareness is always still. Thoughts are simply coming out of this awareness, consciousness, or the ocean. But there's no identification anymore as me or mine. There's no reactivity. So stillness, what did Ajahn Chah would talk about? Still flowing water. You know, have you ever seen still flowing water? So there's a stillness and a flowing. In the deep samadhi, there's just this very still. And what is the flow of that water is just life itself, right? Still flowing water. And then, of course, when thoughts are stirred up, the still flowing water becomes a little bit more flowy, a little bit more rippled. That's all. But the thing is not to make a problem out of thoughts. And, you know, we make a problem when we believe them as me and mine, as right and wrong. It's good and bad, true and false. And can also become a problem when, if we do get very still, like the ocean, then we think, oh my God, that's all I want. And we start rechasing that. I want that again. I want that again. That is the pinnacle of meditation. And so then when thoughts come, we go into battle and think we're not doing well in our meditation. I want to get back to that bliss, that peace. You'll never get back if you keep chasing it. Anyway, you never get back because it's never the same anyway, is it? Kalian. Can we change habitual thought and feeling patterns by meditation? I have complex trauma and ruminating is very present. And those thoughts cause emotions and sensations in the body. Yeah, okay. Well, through meditation, habitual thoughts and feeling patterns will change, do change. In fact, they're already in a process of constant change. Meditation is helping you notice this constant pattern of change. So when you say you have complex trauma, even that's in a process of change. You don't have to fix on to that label of I have PTSD. You don't even have to fix onto that. You have moments that keep changing where you feel deep pain and trauma and fear and panic or, you know, terror. But even then, they're changing. So the thing about meditation in recognizing the constant changing nature is that we stop seeing, you know, we certainly stop thinking that we're going to get to arrive at some end point where that all disappears and that there's some perfect goal we're going to get to where we're not going to have changing thoughts and patterns. Because PTSD or not PTSD, there's always going to be changing thoughts and patterns, you know, and certain events will give rise to pain. Certain events will give rise to pleasure in terms of feelings and emotions. The key is to recognize that which doesn't change. and to take refuge in that. And this is what I was trying to point to. Excuse me, just getting a bit glary again. What I was trying to point to in that meditation was, to recognize and discover your refuge, which is just staying with the knowing in the midst of the changing thoughts and the trauma or the experiences of trauma. And, the thing about painful emotions and sensations is that we fear them, we want to get rid of them. And in that wanting to get rid of stuff, we actually perpetuate it. So it's a very different changing of attitude to welcome, in meditation. And Dharma, really, I want to say Dharma rather than meditation. Dharma is just to really open and welcome everything, because everything is of the same nature. So even if you had the opposite, you were, instead of saying, I have complex trauma, you say, I have ecstasy and bliss all the time. And it's coming in waves, and sometimes I'm just over the moon, excited and feeling love and bliss. I'd say the same thing. They're also changing states, but you go running after them. It's no different from someone who goes running away from PTSD, from trauma, because it's still within the same samsaric realm of changing, impermanent experiences and sensations that we then foolishly think is me, mine, and I have control over. So the reality is that the person experiencing these bliss sensations and being deluded by them and chasing them, it will change, and they will eventually experience the opposite. And so you have to see the same with you. It's not, your complex trauma is not fixed. It will change. And it will change more skillfully, it will change in a more beneficial way through the practice of meditation, because you just know it comes and goes. Okay. And so when we talk about peace in meditation, we don't mean bliss experiences that come and go. We mean peace that remains unmoved and unchanging, regardless of whether there's trauma or bliss. The peace that surpasses understanding. Surpasses understanding. Why did I say path? Anyway. Okay. All right. So someone was listening to St. Teresa before tuning in, having a near-death experience in 2004 due to sunstroke. Wow. You can have near-death experiences due to sunstroke, and open me up more to spirituality. Yes, these intense experiences, including complex trauma, can open us up to wanting to understand this experience, or having, like my friend did in the accident, recognizing quite directly that there's something within him that knew everything was okay. Even if he died in that moment, he would have died laughing, which is fantastic, isn't it? Okay, so Anon has asked, how can I stop hating myself and accepting myself? Well, I would firstly start, with a very conscious, deliberate meditation, which sounds like, when you're talking about non-duality, a bit of a contradiction, because you're saying, may I be well, may I be peaceful. But we have to start there, because, we have this belief in a personality, in a self, and if we've been brought up to belittle ourselves through messages we received, and then we apply those, then we have to, be very skillful in countering them with more positive well-wishing, yeah? And at the same time as wishing ourselves well, and I would encourage you to do a daily 5-10 minutes of conscious meditation. There are some on my channel. There are many out there. So choose someone or a practice that feels good for you, or just learn to do it yourself, yeah? And then in conjunction with wishing yourself well and wishing others well, if you can, then it's also, it's really important and helpful to start investigating this notion you have of yourself, and to see that it's all simply a construct, mostly deriving from the thoughts that come up in your mind, the feelings that you then experience, and you say, this is me, this is my personality, and it's full of crap, it's always whinging, negative, and then we start believing that that's who I am, and it's not. It's so not who we are. It's a reflection of conditioning, that's all. So investigate, start to really investigate what the Buddha meant by non-self. It doesn't mean that you don't have an experience as a person in the world. I mean, there is someone here talking to you, but it's not the self that we take it to be, a fixed entity, permanent entity. And the personality view is the thing we really have to unravel. When you start to understand that the personality is simply a construction of thoughts, feelings, experiences, but where's the unchanging self in all of that? Yeah. So keep going, keep wanting to unravel this notion you have of yourself. Okay, so Judd said he's been meditating for over 20 years and never held my in-out breath as part of my body. Oh, I see. You never related to it as part of the body yet. Always learning, yeah. Well, that's right, because the body is the breath is the body. And if you listen to the Anapanasati Sutta, as taught by the Buddha, it's the body of the breath. Yeah. It's also an aspect of the air element. When you do element meditations, you recognize the breath is the air element, but it is also constitutes the body. Oh, house builder, now I've seen you. You cannot make a new house for me. All your beams are broken. The ridgepole is shattered. What or who is the house builder? Ah, well, that's for you to find out. So the Buddha, that was the Buddha's declaration in his full enlightenment. He saw how samsara is created, comes into being. And it's not that there's some God out there bringing us into being and punishing us. We recognize that this house builder is our own minds, that we create the world constantly through our thoughts, beliefs, perceptions, but most importantly through our clinging to them as me and mine. Yeah, and then obviously in this realm, it's through desire that continues it. It's the desire for sense experiences. So it's the clinging. But fundamentally, the house builder is ignorance, not knowing the truth of reality. I've lost it now. It's jumped about 6 paragraphs. I have to scroll back and try and find where I was up to. There's a lot of questions. I'm not going to be able to get through them all. You know you can answer a lot of your own questions, don't you? Boy, there are a lot of questions that I can't even find where I was. Okay, there's Amy, Carlian, Judd, Dillis. Daniel, found you. Can one receive transmission without a teacher? Well, without a physical teacher? Again, it's a bit like the God concept. How are you defining transmission if it's just this narrow idea that transmission comes from a physical teacher that you sit in front of? You know, transmission, what does it mean? Well, you know, I can't ask you, but, you know, I'd ask you, what does it mean to you? What does transmission mean? And, you know, in the Tibetan tradition too, but not even just in the Tibetan tradition, transmission of Dharma, we'll talk about, of truth to truth, can come through different means, mind to mind, sort of transmission, or I prefer heart to heart. So when one receives a transmission, it means that one has, it goes beyond the intellectual understanding. It goes really into insight, truth, into the heart. And there are many ways that one can receive a transmission, and it, sometimes they come well beyond this physical realm. They come through visions, sometimes through lucid dreams. They come through people who we don't actually think of as a teacher, you know. So if we just limit it to some guy on a dais with a funny hat, and we think that's the only true transmission, then we're limiting ourselves. And transmission can come through, you know, some people poo-poo reading. You know, you can't understand the teachings just by reading them. And at one level, that's true. But if one's really reading them and receiving the transmission of the truth of the teaching, like people say you can read Longchenpa, and, you know, Patrul said this, you read the basic space of knowing, basic space of phenomena, and that is a transmission in itself, and you will be completely transformed. You know, and that's in translation. And that's a teaching that was written down in the 14th century. But if it touches your heart and causes a major change in your understanding of reality, then that's a transmission. It can come through hearing the teaching. And in the Zen, you have so many different fantastic transmissions happening, don't you? Or moments of Kensho. You know, the frog jumping plop, the sound of the plop of the frog, all sorts of things, the wind moving, the flag, they're all different transmissions that result in some sort of awakening. And if you want to just expand your concept of this teacher, that everything is teaching us, not just this very rigid notion of a teacher. You know, who was it? Was it Shank? I can't remember who it was now. One of the Advaita masters. I don't think it was Shankara. Anyway, he said he had 24 different, Dattatreya, I think it was, yeah. 24 gurus of Dattatreya. Have I got the number right? All of these poor Advaita people, if I'm doing it, making a mockery of, sorry. I think it was 24. The 24 gurus of Dattatreya. It's on my channel. And so he learned from the bees, he learned from the birds, he learned from the wind, he learned from the elements, and he received transmission from them. So he was completely open to learning from every moment and every manifestation in life. So there, that's my answer. Of course you can. Transmission is happening all the time. So John is asking, a preference for nirvana over samsara. Okay. Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, let's not go there. It's a little bit coming to the end of this, and that's a whole big topic. But it's also, those concepts are dealt with quite differently in the Theravada tradition, as opposed to particularly in the Dzogchen. But they're basically saying the same thing. But nirvana simply means, in my tradition, the going out of suffering. And the suffering comes from ignorance, not knowing. So when that ends, when one is fully awake, then you can say that the experience is nirvana, or nibbana in Pali, right? It's the ending of suffering. So when you say, do we have a preference? Going beyond the word preference to wisdom is just knowing the reality of things. And why would someone want to continue suffering through delusion when they realize the truth of the way things are? It naturally ceases. So it's not a preference. It's just natural that when one realizes truth, deluded traveling in samsara ceases. That's natural. Preferencing ceases well before. Okay. As a meditator, is it best to avoid fools? No, they're your best teachers. At one level, how can I apply this to my life and family without being judgmental or shut off? Yeah, good question. And at one level, it's best to avoid hanging out with them, and them being your constant companions, because who you hang out with will rub off on you. So, however, we can't shut off the world. Fools are everywhere, and we're all fools anyway. So don't think that you're not a fool, because you're a fool too. We're all fools until we're fully awakened. But some, I guess, are more foolish than others and causing more suffering. So, and families are full of fools. That's part of it. But you've got to shift your attitude towards that. So a couple of things. One, we have compassion for fools, because we're all fools. We're fooled by appearances, you can say. And firstly, if we have compassion, then we refrain from being so judgmental. But if we also shift our attitude to, geez, this person can teach me a lot, this person shows me my judgmental, narky nature. This person shows me the greed, hatred, and delusion within me, because I hate them. I don't want them around. And this person is teaching me great patience. So they're great teachers. And Ajahn Chah used to say, whatever is annoying you, whatever is irritating you, that is your teacher. So no need to shut off your family and friends unless they're obviously being extremely abusive to you and you just need to walk away. I'm not saying just stay there and get abused. But if they're just normal people who are deluded like most of the world, then learn from them and also help them at the same time without being preachy. Be a good example by practicing patience and understanding. But yeah, don't go hanging out with lots of morons because it's not going to help you in your spiritual practice. Okay. So I'm only going to be able to take a few more questions. I'm going to apologize in advance, coming up to 8:45. So someone has asked, is active addiction an extreme manifestation of the Four Noble Truths. Yeah, it is, I guess. I would take those Four Noble Truths to whatever addiction it is that you're experiencing, and you can really start to understand suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the path leading to the end of suffering. And it is, I guess it is very intense, those addictions, whether they be drug addictions or one of the many other addictions out there. Francis, is in observing thoughts, we cannot observe a thinker, but an eye cannot observe itself. Right? Is not the observer of thoughts the thinker? Can be. In observing thoughts, we become aware that we are the thinker. Yeah, so there's a bit of a koan for you all, perhaps to contemplate. The observer of thoughts in itself can become a thought, depending on how we turn our attention to it. But bare, naked observation is not a thought, unless we concretize it, conceptualize it. So all these thoughts that you're presenting, Francis, are going to create more and more concepts and ideas. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because at the end of it all, you'll be so exhausted, you'll stop thinking. It's like the Zen koans, isn't it? Oh, and that was the whole point of them. These conundrums, these koans that Zen disciples were given, kind of send them a little bit mad, to the point where they just stopped and they understood non-conceptually. So I guess my question to you, because there's a lot of questions there, is can you know without thinking? Is it possible to know without the mind moving? In the Dzogchen tradition, it's referred to as empty cognizance. That awareness, you can call it observation if you like, because that's the word you've used. That observing itself is empty of a self, yet cognizant. And when it is in its purest state, or its deepest state, it's unmoving. So it's not thinking, because thinking is moving, right? Whenever we think, there's movement, and it's conceptual. But when there's just simply empty cognizing, there's no movement, there's no self, but there's awareness, or rigpa, knowing. But when we're just on the surface of things trying to figure this out, or just have little micro moments of recognizing, then there's quite a lot of movement taking place. Yeah, so I think that's where you're coming from. So use these questions to take you beyond thinking about it and conceptualizing it, to the point where you'll just give up thinking and it'll stop. And even when it just stops for a moment, when it really stops, even for a moment, then that is nibbana. It's a going out. Because this movement is dukkha, suffering. Okay. All right. suffering sucks. No, yes, I want to say something a little bit more about suffering sucks. It only sucks when we perceive it as suffering. This is the thing. There is suffering, but it's because we're perceiving it out of ignorance. When it doesn't mean we have to get rid of things, you know. The suffering is there because we believe it to be me and mine. When there's just life, like go back to babyhood, everybody. There was no suffering. I mean, there is a bit when you're born, of course. But in those moments when the baby's free from any sort of, even when it's got physical pain, a bit of pain in the belly, it cries, but, let's go. We did. We cried and let go, forgot about it. And then in that moment of letting go, it's just, life without anyone there experiencing it. There's just life itself experiencing itself. The concept of suffering comes in when we go, I'm here. And when I'm here, judging it, liking it, and not liking it, concretizing it, that's when suffering starts. But otherwise, it's just life. Okay? But beyond these appearances, there's something else. The ground from which all these appearances are arising and ceasing, like my hysterically laughing friend saw, is always there. And this is just a show. And such he was able just to laugh at it in the midst of where he's probably about to die in a car accident. He recognized that there's no suffering. Fundamentally, there's just appearances. And we cause the suffering through our belief in it. The builder of the house keeps creating this ignorance. Rightio. So I'm going to love you and leave you because it's 8:45 now, and I'm apologize in advance if I didn't get to all your questions. But I have limitations on my capacity. Unlike Jatindra, who could go on forever, I start to get a little bit brain dead because I'm not much of a thinker, really. And so the battery wears out after a while. Same with my laptop. I just can't keep talking. All right. Love you all. Lots of metta, especially to those of you who think you're worthless. Send yourself good wishes, recognizing that you're actually free from yourself already. Just let go. Okay, take care, everybody. Jatindra will be with you in a fortnight. And I don't think I had to report anything else. Sun's coming out now. And I'm off for a walk in the forest. So whatever your day is doing, ending, beginning, halfway there, in terms of time, may it go well, and may you all realize Nibbana. Take care.